So Crypto Crow, welcome to the Princess channel. We're going to talk about your life story today, but before we do that, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. Just what day is it? Is today Thursday? I think it is.
It
Yeah,
is Thursday, yes.
every day this week has been running together, but I'm getting through it. We're almost at Friday. My
Almost at
wife
Friday.
and daughter have actually been in Cincinnati all week for spring break. So I've been basically just in home alone, just kind of working on stuff and doing random things. I started getting back into like little miniatures. I'm going to start painting again because I need the therapy. So yeah, I've just been just chilling by myself, keeping myself entertained.
Awesome, awesome. So Crypto Crow, the resident question that I always ask when I do a crypto story interview is, if I was to meet you in high school, what kind of person were you?
Oh, interesting. Well, I didn't finish high school, so I was. I would say I was rebelliously bored in high school, uh, and I got into a lot of trouble. I spent half of my sophomore year in school suspension. So, I was just high school for me was such an interesting time. I absolutely hated it. I just hated it. I hated the monotony of it. I hated the redundancy of it. I hated the cliques and the groups and just everything about it felt staged and wrong. Like I knew there was nothing I was being exposed to that was going to help me in life, and I just rebelled against it. And I said, "Hell with it." I would play hooky all the time. It got to the point where I would tell my mom, like, "I'm sick. I'm not going." I hated it. And what's funny is I dropped out as a sophomore actually, and I started my first business like shortly after. So I went and I got into the IT field, and I did a lot of stuff. I didn't even own a computer yet, but I was repairing them for a company, and I was just fascinated with computers. Actually, I did own a computer when I was like 11. It was a Commodore, and I took it apart. I got into so much trouble for that, but I was always fascinated with how things worked, and so I spent a lot of time in libraries. My mom and I would go to garage sales, and we would just buy tons of books. And I just read about everything I could think of. Mostly, if there was a business or a book about business or being self-employed or like whatever, man. I read it. It didn't matter if it was from the 70s because a lot of them were like, it's just like whatever I could get my hands on. But yeah, I hated high school, and I didn't really have a lot of friends in high school because I was a smart ass. And it's funny because I've connected obviously with so many people from high school on Facebook, and a lot of them don't seem surprised that I've achieved what I've achieved, which I find very interesting because back then I was like that punk ass kid who, was just rebelling and was stirring up shit out of boredom. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's very interesting to see, a lot of the comments from people back then. But yeah, that was it. That was my high school.
So I'm based in the UK. What's sophomore? What age is that? Is that
That was
like
the 10th
17?
grade.
Oh, 10th grade. So
Yeah.
about 16. Yeah, I didn't finish high school either, so don't worry, you're in good company.
Yeah, good.
Um, so
This
from
is
my
the indoctrination period of my life, so that's probably why I'm such a free thinker today.
so from my understanding, you got into crypto in 2017.
Yeah.
Now, for those people who are unaware, 2017 was very, very early. Bitcoin was about 8 years old. It was the Bitcoin's second bull run. Bitcoin started off the year at around about $1,000 and it ended the bull run at 20,000 or around about 20,000 in December. You're very, very early into crypto. How did you get in?
Well, it's funny. At the time, I was actually building a mortgage bank. um, I've done so many different wild things. I get really bored, right? So I'll do something in a completely different industry for 6 years on average. I was an MMA pro am MMA fight promoter. At one point, I did that for about 6 years. I did a lot of fights at casinos, and I bring in like UFC veterans, and then I pit them against like my local top guys. And I did that for a long time, and it was a lot of fun. I had a web development business for years. I kind of did that on the side, no matter what I was doing, because it was easy. It'd be like a quick $5,000 over a weekend building a website for somebody, you know. And ultimately, I ended up leaving mixed martial arts, and a guy that he would bring his kids to my gym for jujitsu class, and he saw on Facebook that I was looking to make a career change, and he owned a mortgage company, and he's like, you know, come work for me, man. You have stuff that nobody can teach. You know, I'll teach you how to do really well. And I ended up, and I did that, and he taught me a lot, and within 6 months, I was one of his number one guys in the office. We used to call it dialing for dollars, where we were just calling lead after lead, selling refinance loans. And, I mean, at one point I had like a $7 million pipeline of deals that were being worked on, when the average LO at the time maybe had two, and so I basically ran with that, and I did really well. And then the long and short of it is I ended up becoming an independent consultant, where I would go in and branch managers would pay me directly as a consultant to go in and train their loan officers on how to talk to people, how to do this, how to do that. And then I ended up getting an offer to become like the VP of sales and marketing for a national mortgage bank. And biggest mistake in a way, but it was a blessing in disguise. I went from working, 3 or 4 hours a week to just grinding out every day in a boring office. And I was effectively like a branch manager, but they wanted me to help with other branches. So there was a lot to it. But anyway, I got into crypto by just watching YouTube videos. And because my uncle we had the last time I saw him, oh my gosh, midnight. My cat's up here. Come here. This is Midnight. This is my black Maine Coon.
Gorgeous.
She is beautiful, but she's a little punk. But yeah, she's sweet when she wants something, and otherwise she's no cares to give about you whatsoever. So yeah. So my uncle, basically, we were talking at a campfire one night, and he was telling me about his dividend portfolio and his dividend stocks. And now I'm building a mortgage bank, and it's like, okay, you're talking my language. I'm learning. And, he told me he had an aortic valve problem, and he knew that he could just basically pass away at any moment. Like he was 6'10", and he had this expanding aortic valve, and they were supposed to operate on it, but the doctor said that they wanted to wait until it was so drastic that the risk of the surgery outweighed the risk of not doing it. And he basically invested in dividend stocks, and he built up a portfolio so that no matter what happened to him, my cousins and my aunt were taken care of financially. And so that was the last time I saw him. And keep in mind, that was like the 10th year they were inviting me to this camp out trip that I always turned down. And for whatever reason, I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to take my stepson. And he got to meet all my uncles and my cousins. And it was literally like him hanging out in the valley of living trees, because all my uncles are giant and my cousins are even taller. It's kind of crazy. But my uncle did end up passing away not long after that in China at dinner. He just basically just dropped right there at dinner. And that's a whole other story, but essentially he put me on the path of investing, right? So as I'm researching dividend stocks, I would start to see videos popping up on YouTube about ICOs and crypto and blockchain. And I started watching videos from guys like Superman back then and Ian Bellina. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this stuff, what is this? And I kept, and so I'm doing all of this while I'm building a mortgage bank, and I'm in my office researching crypto while I'm trying to train my loan officers and recruit more. And I'm doing all of these things at the same time. And then I started learning enough about it that I built my first Ethereum mining rig. And I basically invested everything that my rig would mine. And, essentially I ended up turning $3,000 into 90 grand in about 60 days. And that's about when I started my YouTube channel. Because I thought, well, hell, man, if I'm learning all this stuff and I can do this, my daughters would probably watch this. Like if their dad's on YouTube, and they were really young, but I thought, this would be a cool way of teaching my kids without me like harping over them. Like, you must do this. Like, it's just about what I'm doing now with my youngest daughter with AI. Yeah, and that's just how it went. And my YouTube channel took off, and I grew so fast, everyone thought it was fake. Like I was getting 2,500 subscribers a day because I was just sharing my journey. Like there was no like, I'm trying to be famous, I'm trying to get big. There was none of that. I didn't even think it was possible. It's just me. Nobody gives a shit about me. But like, I thought if I just shared information that I wasn't finding elsewhere, that people will learn from it, whether it's 5 people or 500. I had no idea it was going to grow like it did. Yeah, that's what got me into it, man. That's how I got started. And it really hasn't stopped since. And now I'm all gray. Like my first videos, I feel like being in crypto is kind of like being president. I think the stress of it just turns you gray really fast. So yeah, now I'm wearing my old man hat, my glasses. I didn't have glasses back then. I'm all gray, who knows, by the next bull market, I might just be 400 pounds and I'll just be sitting around eating Cheetos with all my Bitcoins and Cardano just piling around me, doing absolutely nothing with myself. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see, but cheers.
So when you got in, it seemed like you did a lot all by yourself, but who was actually supporting you? Did you have anyone in the background, apart from obviously your uncle who got you in?
I mean, my wife, of course, she, back then when I was first getting into this, I had this big emotional epiphany one night where a lot of people don't know this, but I actually invented DeFi before there was DeFi. And I'll tell you that. And I have proof of it. But what happened was, and it came from this big emotional epiphany I had at like 4 a.m. where I kind of like went manic and was crying and hysterical. So anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night, and this is after I'm like reading books, reading articles, watching videos all day. Like it was all consuming, right? And I was watching a lot of stuff that I still didn't understand. And it's like, I'm a slow learner, right? Which I think was a part of my problem in high school. It's like once it clicks with me, it never leaves. But I learn and forget a lot of noise, if that makes sense, right? So if I don't feel like if my mind doesn't find it as relevant or overly important, it goes right out of me. I always joke and I say I've forgotten more about crypto than most people will probably learn, because it's just how my mind works. I hold on to what I think is valuable, which is typically caused by triggers that are relevant to something I'm specifically working on right now, right? So anyway, I was consuming all of this information. And then one night, man, like 4 a.m., it clicked. Everything clicked to the point where it was like a flood of emotion, which sounds silly, right? Because we're not talking about some spiritual enlightenment. We're not talking about like, oh my God, there is a God and I know the meaning of life. It wasn't anything like that. It's like, this is technology, right? What are you so emotional about? But it was if you picture, somebody's mind just being bombarded with data and it's just bouncing, and then all of a sudden it just starts flowing in and taking you over and it all makes sense. It's basically what happened. And it was like an emotional rush. And I remember shaking and I was kind of crying, and my wife was like, oh my God, are you okay? She had no idea what was happening to me. And she's like, pat my back, and she's like, are you okay? What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And I'm like, I get it. I fucking get it. I understand all this shit. And I explained to her definance, like the decentralized finance, right? And this is before there was decentralized finance. I think there were DAOs. There was like a big DAO at the time, and I didn't even know what the hell that was back then. And she's like, that sounds great, dear. Like, go with it, and I'm like, oh, I am. This is going to be my life now. And Um, that was actually just before I think I started my YouTube channel, because I originally got into crypto like August of that year of 2017. I didn't start my
Towards
channel
the end.
until
Yeah.
November, once things started really clicking with me. And that was when I'm like, okay, now that I understand this, I want to start sharing it and teaching it, right? And so yeah, that's how that came about. But I created, I called it a universal wallet, and it was the same idea as DeFi is today, but I called it a universal wallet where everybody's putting tokens into this system that everyone else is basically able to pull from depending on what coin they needed for whatever particular reason. And they were earning a yield and another token. I mean, all of it. I still had the white paper I wrote that week.
Wow.
And when I tried to launch it, I tried to launch an ICO for it, and nobody understood what the hell I was talking about. And so I did a video. I did this animated video. It's still on YouTube, that kind of explained the concept of it. Like, imagine, you're trying to buy a video card, but you need Bitcoin and you have this coin instead. And it was like explaining it. People still didn't get it. And I had developers that I brought on that were trying to help me, and it was just a cluster, and nobody got it. And then I don't know how long it took until DeFi really started to kick off on Ethereum. I think it was 2 or 3 years later, maybe. And I'm like, this is exactly what I was trying to build. I just called things differently. And but anyway, yeah, I should be a trillionaire right now, and I'm not. I'm still just an old man with like nothing. But yeah, my wife supported me through all of it. And when all that was happening, we were talking to a financial advisor about our 401ks. And I told her, I was like, listen, you do whatever you want with your 401k. I didn't have as big a one as hers because I was pretty much self-employed since high school, outside of when I was working in the mortgage business, which I did that for like, I worked for the company with like W-2, I think, for, I don't know, it might have been 4 years. I can't remember. And then I did everything else for a couple of years on my own. But uh, I was like, you do what you want. I'm going to go into this crypto stuff. And she's like, okay. And my wife supported me through and through. She never went like, it was exciting. She didn't really understand what the hell I was doing or talking about, but she knew that I was excited about it. So that was pretty much all that mattered to her. And, when I told her, I'm going to go the crypto route, you do your thing. And within 6 months, all of our debts were paid off. And I literally paid off everything we had. I paid off our student loans. Pretty much just paid off everything. And so, yeah, that was pretty much the first like year of being in crypto. I think I ended up with like 54 Bitcoin by the end of that first cycle. But now keep in mind, that was also because once my YouTube channel hit like 50,000 subscribers, I just started getting flooded with people wanting to do paid advertisements on my channel, promoting their projects. And I was so ignorant back then. Now I'm kind of an asshole about it. I still do paid stuff, but I've always disclosed through like everything. But especially back then, I think some of these groups are a little wiser to me now, so I don't get as much. But I would have companies pay me a Bitcoin to talk about their project. And if I thought it was a crap show, I would tell everyone. Like, they just pay me a Bitcoin to tell you this is a shit show. You might want to stay away. And they would get so mad, and they would just like threaten everything. And, it got to the point where I started having other people handle it for me because I just didn't want to deal with it. I just, and then I'd have companies say, we'll give you a Bitcoin to read our white paper. Don't do any content. Just tell us what's wrong with it and tell us what you think is wrong with our project. And I'm like, nope, not doing that. If I'm going to put in all the time, like, I'm going to turn it into a video for my channel and let people know what I think. Like, some people were like, all right, fine. They'd be willing to roll the dice. And I would put it back on them. Like, listen, you shouldn't be afraid of truth. And I'm like, granted, it might be my opinion, but if you're just a cash grab, and you're expecting somebody to just take your check and say whatever you think they should to promote you, and that it doesn't work here. Like, this isn't going to be the way that works. And the thing of it is at a time when a lot of people wouldn't watch paid segments or paid videos about projects because they knew, oh, well, this is paid. They're going to say good stuff no matter what. They would still
Mhm.
watch mine because they would either A, want to figure out what do I honestly think, or B, they would get the biggest kick out of watching me charge somebody a Bitcoin to shit all over them. So and so it was exciting and it was watchable. And that so either way you slice that cake, it tasted great, whether it was for me or for the viewer. Yeah, it's yeah. So
Mhm.
anyway.
Okay, we're going to talk about Cardano in a second, but just before we do that, you said you started your YouTube channel in November. We hit the high in December, and then we slid into a bear market. How did you cope? How did you cope with the bear market coming so soon after you starting your YouTube channel?
I didn't know anything about cycles then. None of it made sense to me. I was waiting for it all to go back up. I had all these Bitcoin, and like when it hit $20,000, I was like, or I think it was like 19.8 or something was the official peak. But I was like, this is amazing. I couldn't believe this. I had first bought Cardano. I think my first Cardano buy, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was like 13 cents at the time. And I thought it was such a big deal. I bought 15,000 ADA, right? And that was like my very first Cardano video back then. And it's so funny because if you watch that video, I'm whispering to the camera because I'm trying not to be loud because all my staff are out there working. And I'm like in my office, I've got this little glass window where I can see what everyone's doing. But I'm like, hey, the Cardano is going to be the best shit ever, right? And so that was like my first Cardano video. But I didn't understand cycles. And I remember, is it Charlie Lee, the founder of Litecoin? I can't remember. I always get him mixed up with Tom Lee. But he had dumped all of
Yeah.
his Litecoin. And I was like, you son of a bitch. What are you thinking? What are you doing? Like, we're just like, and I didn't understand cycles. I'm like, why would this guy do something so terrible to try and just dump on all of his people, right? And yeah, I watched everything go down. I ended up not even selling anything until Bitcoin like hit 8,500, and I'm like, oh, we're not going back. Like this is all this is a fever dream. Like we're not going back. We had a big peak, and all these top guys are dumping, and so I finally broke down and sold. And yeah, that was that. I mean, like, what could you do about it? There was still so much I didn't understand about the way crypto worked back then. I didn't fully understand the cycles. You hear people talking about them, but you don't necessarily understand what they mean. So yeah, that was like a 2021 market thing. And by then, not only did I understand the market cycles, but I called the peak to the day, and I said it was going to be a 2-peak cycle. And everybody thought I was crazy. So I ended up being like, Mr. Lee, where everybody was trashing me, trolling me.
Bless
Excuse
you.
me. And I'm like, no, I'm like, this is how it is. And I'm like, this is what it looks like. And yeah, so yeah, it took a little while to pick that up and learn like how things work.
Okay, let's talk about Cardano. Now, I do know you were very, very early into Cardano. How did you find Cardano, and how early were you?
Um, I mean, I was pretty early. I can't remember the date of my first Cardano video now. I'm thinking I can't remember when my first video was, but I found it before I started covering it on my channel. And I I really don't even remember how I discovered it for the first time. I think I may have just seen the name and just started clicking through stuff, and it just became a rabbit hole for me. It was just kind of a happenstance thing. I don't even think Charles had done his whiteboard video for it yet. Like nothing had happened yet. If I remember the time frames correctly, which is possible, I got that wrong. But I don't remember seeing Charles yet before I was really into it. And I think a lot of that stemmed from I was just clicking through and I was reading all the documentation. And I was reading a lot of stuff at the time I did not understand. Like I could go there today and still read some of that shit and still not understand what the hell he's talking about or what
Yeah,
the
he's a
engineer.
genius. I don't understand him either. I just
Yeah,
trust him.
it's like trying to learn a new language in Cardano land. But um, I I just remember just the decentralized nature of it really stood out, and scalability, interoperability, all of the keywords associated with Cardano. Um, and then I was reading a lot of the documentation related to how they were going to bring this about and how everything was going to work and why and that's what really sold me, because at the time all of the white papers I was reading were very flimsy at the time, and they were very much like, this is how we're going to make money. This is money, 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 money. And everything just felt very cash grabby or shady, or and it was like, hey, we're going to throw all these little trigger words at you, but really we're just saying we're going to make money, right? And I'm like, that all felt very flimsy to me. And then when you get to Cardano, it doesn't even talk about money. It doesn't talk about we're going to make this and we're going to make that. What it talked about is how it was basically going to change the world and how it was going to change finance and how it was going to, that's what stuck with me. It was the mission that stuck with me, not I'm going to make money because I'm buying this. That wasn't even a thing. But the token to me represented everything that these papers were laying out. And so when I first bought the tokens, I didn't know if it was going to do well. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that I valued the mission, and I valued the people that were putting the mission on paper and setting off on this amazing journey. And I knew that, and I even said in that very first video, I'm like, I'm married to Cardano from this day forward. Like, my channel is going to be all about understanding this, following its development, everything that I've done since that day. And I didn't even understand then when I did the video just how big a deal it all would ultimately be. But here we are.
Mhm, mhm. Did you know at the time that Charles Hoskinsons was a co-founder of Ethereum?
I think I did. Yeah, I think I did. Because I
Mm.
think that was one of the first things that everything said back then. And he hated it. He hated being recognized as the co-founder of Ethereum over being the founder of Cardano. And I get it, but I mean, listen, it is what it is. You got to start maybe with a Toyota before you start working on the Porsche. It's okay.
Okay, so we'll talk about your relationship with Charles a little bit later. What I want to focus on now is the pandemic. So, 2020, the pandemic hit. March 2020, most of the world was in lockdown. People were dying. Businesses were closing. There was so much economical concerns. Bitcoin fell from 9,200 to 3,800 US dollars. Cardano must have just gone even more than that. It was a very, very difficult time. What were you doing at the time? Did you ever lose faith in cryptocurrency? Were you buying or did you sell?
Um, that I sell because of the pandemic? Oh, absolutely not. No, I didn't lose any faith in crypto at all. Um, I see. It's difficult for me to answer some of this without feeling political, and I don't want to get too political, but um, I will just say this: I'm not vaccinated, and nobody in my like my immediate family is either. And that was all happening at a time when I was reading a lot about the World Economic Forum and their global agenda, and how a lot of the people that are related to the alumni of the World Economic Forum, the Trudeau and the Bidens, and like all these left-wing politicians, they all had a plan. Like, and they were running simulations of that plan. Even before that, I had read a document by the Rockefeller Foundation from 2010 that broke down the four phases of like this great reset type thing. And a pandemic was part of the simulation, and it was the first quarter of that model. And so when it all started happening, I'm like, I can't believe this is real. I want to get the hell out of here, is what I thought. And I thought, okay, I've got this big crypto portfolio that I'm sure is going to do well. Yes, the market was dumping and everything, but I was talking to my wife, and things were going really well for us. But I was nervous about what sorts of dramatic changes might come about, right? And so I remember I had a talk with Mark Moss, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's amazing. He's a huge YouTuber, and but he's kind of a Bitcoin maxi. But he's a super smart guy, and he's just a great guy. Watch some of his stuff, and you'll understand. But he and I were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I live in Puerto Rico right now," and he's like, "You should come out, you'd love it." And he's a big surfer from California, and he looks like a surfer. I don't know how old he is, but he doesn't really age. And I'm like, dude, he's in salt water all the time. So the guy doesn't look like me. He probably still looks like he's 30. And I don't remember if he's older than me or not, but he sure doesn't look like it. But he ended up living in Rincon, Puerto Rico, and he convinced me to do it. He convinced me to make a giant leap. And he's like, "You should come to Puerto Rico. You'll love it." And I talked to my wife about it, who's like a big salsa dancer. She was into Latin ballroom. She competed in all these different dance styles. And she's like, "Yeah, like Puerto Rico, that's like the salsa capital of the world. Let's go." And, so we did. We like literally sold everything, gave away a ton of shit. I mean, we had all of our furniture. Like if we couldn't sell it on the cheap, we just put it in the yard and posted on like Craigslist or whatever it was at the time to come pick it up. And we sold our cars. We literally sold everything. Everything we owned were my computers, basically, that we put in boxes. And we got a plane. We took 8 friends, and we just took a plane to Puerto Rico. We're like, "Yo, guys, we're moving to Puerto Rico. Come with us for a couple weeks. Enjoy a vacation." You know what I mean? But we're getting the hell out of here. Thinking Puerto Rico would be better than what was happening, because this was just when, I walked into a gas station in Northern Kentucky, and they're like, "Wear your mask," and everybody's yelling at you for these masks, and all this shit was just starting to get crazy. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm in a dystopian comic book," is what it felt like. And I'm like, none of it made sense. And I wasn't buying into it. I'm like, none of this makes actual sense. It's like, who is doing this and why? But it doesn't matter. I thought Puerto Rico would be different. So and I thought, well, it's a tax haven for the US. So I did the whole Act 20, Act 60. The long and short of it is it was not better. It was 10 times worse. It was, it was like you couldn't go anywhere without showing papers. Now, it didn't start that way, but it progressed because when we got on the plane to Puerto Rico, that it was April 13th was the day we flew. And I'm literally, all my stuff is on the plane. And I called the peak of the market on Twitter. As I'm boarding this plane and all my shit's in boxes, I couldn't do anything. But I'm like, the market just peaked. And I was so pissed that I'm like, okay, how fast can we get to Puerto Rico? Ended up being like a 3-hour flight. And we get to Puerto Rico. And then I posted as soon as we landed, I'm like, because people were flaming the hell out of me. And I'm like, but don't worry, this is probably going to be a 2-peak cycle. And I'm like, I could be wrong. And everyone's like, there's no way. We've never had that. This never happened before. And I'm like, oh, whatever. I don't know what to tell you. But everything lined up identically with the NASDAQ in 2007. And I'm like, we've got another peak coming if this continues to line out, which it did. And but by the time we got to Puerto Rico, I got hit so hard with the heat, I ended up with vertigo for like 2 months. I couldn't even get out of bed. So we ended up in an Airbnb for the first couple of weeks that we were there, and everything was just starting to get to me. And then we finally find a house, finally get set up. Now this is weeks later after the peak. The long and short of it is, Puerto Rico got so bad. Everybody on the island got the jab. And then shortly after, everyone on the island got the variant. They came down with the variant. Like right after. All boom, boom, boom at the same time. And I'm like, wait a minute. You guys all just and they all knew. It's funny because if you talk to everybody, they all knew it was all nothing added up to them either. But they felt forced to comply because you could not live unless you did XYZ. And a lot of people in Puerto Rico don't have the resources of us gringos coming into their island with our money in the tax haven and the Act 20, Act 60. They hated that shit. And I understood it. But my wife and I just made it a point to just try and show everyone we met, like, we're not these people. Like, we bought a house in Caguas, not Dorado. We wanted to be among the people, with the people. We wanted to build relationships and learn the culture and all of that. We weren't there to just be like some gringos in a little white castle somewhere, you know what I mean, disassociated from our environment and just kind of living above it, you know? Like, that's not what we wanted. I mean, we heard automatic gunfire literally every night around midnight, like, because that's when like a lot of the gang activity would kick off when the sun goes down. And it was crazy, but it ends up being like crickets at night. Once it starts, you know it's bedtime. Like, so, and I'm like, it's funny, but I'm actually not kidding. You get used to it. But yeah, it was just so crazy. We ended up, like, after 6 months, we left the tax benefits behind. We left everything behind. We couldn't go anywhere. Just for my wife to go to the gym, she had to stock up on all of the PCR tests or whatever, because she had to have a new test done like every 2 days just to be able to go into the gym if you're not jabbed. And everything we did, you know, you had to show your vax papers to get in. And it just started getting so much more restrictive. And then like everything else, the power grid, all the problems associated with it, we were like, you know what? It's not worth it. Just not worth it. And so we came back. I mean, it was 6 months later, whatever it was, and you know, left everything behind.
Mhm. Okay, so let's talk about that, because I'm very interested to know how you actually called the double top. So after we had the COVID dip, we did a V-shaped recovery and we started to slowly climb out of the dip. We went up in 2021 till April, where we had the first peak, $64,000.
Right.
The China FUD hit. We basically fell 50%. We ranged at 30,000 for a good couple of months. Bitcoins were taken off the exchanges because of the supply shock. We went up and we did the second peak. We had the second peak at $69,000 in November. The SEC came in, issued Wells notices. Then we had economical and inflation concerns, and then we slid back down into a bear market. How did you call the first peak?
The first peak was very simple. The first peak, I was just looking at the pi cycle indicator. Once that crossed over, I'm like, the market just peaked. That was it, because it was accurate, and it's still been accurate up to that point. But there was a variable in this market that we didn't have really in 2017 or any market prior, and that was institutional involvement. So the way I was looking at everything was back in 2017 when the CME futures launched, and then they started bragging about how they tamed Bitcoin. I thought to myself, okay, this was the institutional groups announcing they're now involved in crypto, right? And it's only going to get more from here. And, you know, you had the bear market, and you had, you know, everything leading up into the next bull market. And they were all basically trashing and fudding crypto and Bitcoin, right? But I knew it was all bullshit, because I'm like, you're not launching investment vehicles into an asset space that you're then trying to turn around and FUD for no reason at all. And, you know, we knew that they were basically building their own investment vehicles, like their own, you know, their own tools, their own, they were do all kinds of shit, like behind the scenes, they're building, right? And, you know, like, I know they were building, like, I forget who it was, not JP Morgan, I can't remember the name, but they were building basically like an internal exchange platform for like over-the-counter trading. Like, there were so many different things that they were building behind the scenes while they're telling everybody, don't buy it yet. Oh, I'll fire any of my employees that are caught with Bitcoin or any crypto asset in their personal holdings. And they were just trying to FUD it to suppress the price. So I knew they were in, right? They were getting in. And they were just laying their own framework. And so I started thinking to myself, if institutions are in, what does that look like? And then I started looking at historical charts in other institutional markets, like ta-da, the NASDAQ. And so when I started looking at the NASDAQ charts, I was recognizing that the patterns were almost identical. Now, if you think about trading, like I've got all these books and audio books even on the Wyckoff patterns, right? The Wyckoff accumulation, distribution, and all that. That's like one of the primary institutional trading methods for all these guys. And so if you know they're acting with patterns, and they can do different things. Like some of the prop firms might do this or do things differently and all of that. But Wyckoff is most widely known and used amongst institutions. And so if you take a lot of those patterns and then you just start comparing them to like other institutional charts, you'll start seeing the differences with breaks and nuance for, other groups, right? But I basically took the crypto and I would use like the bars pattern, right? So I'd take the chart, overlay it on top of this and see how it lines up and just played with all of that stuff. And a lot of it is just like sifting gold in a way. You're trying to get rid of the noise, you're sifting through, you're trying to find something shiny. And I felt I did. I like it matched up. Like the Bitcoin pattern was basically equivalent to the NASDAQ from like the 2007. I think it was 2007 on, but condensed. So it's like everything that's happening in Bitcoin is happening a fourth of the time frame that happened in the NASDAQ. And if we're really wanting to take things to a crazy level, if it were still similar, we're not going to have a bull peak and a drop this cycle. This could, where we're at and the way that we're just kind of incrementally going up, this could happen over the next decade. And if you think about it from the perspective of, like the World Economic Forum, and like you've got all of these like liberal controlled countries now, and like everything that's happening with their dollar, the devaluation, like it's not a coincidence, people, that all of this shit is happening in all of these left-wing controlled countries with their currency and all. One of the biggest slogans back then, there were two that everybody talks about: build back better, and you'll own nothing and be happy. Yeah. If the dollar, if the currency of a country isn't worth very much, you don't really have a choice. You don't have the buying power to buy anything. You have to rent, you have to lease, you have to pay for services, right? And now we've got AI that's coming to the picture, and it's like when you think about AI and the fact that, like, I swear every week, every month, I'm watching like what's the latest on AI. And like now this Manus has come out, and you've got all these new models coming. Then you have Elon Musk with the Optimus bots that are likely going to drop in 2026. So many of these different jobs and tasks are going to be taken over by software and mechanical beings, whatever we want to call them. I want one. I want two. I want one to take apart and one to actually use. My daughter's scared to death. She's like, "Dad, you're not getting a robot." I'm like, "Yes, I am." And I'm like, but I'm like, what's going to happen with the people that are, they just don't have a job, right? And I'm kind of like going off in a different directions because I have my theory about what's likely happening. But this is all going to take time. And I don't see these institutions getting in and doing everything that they're doing right now. Regulatory clarity, all of these things, just to have another significant drop in the market. If anything, I think we have a fake out drop, sometime this year. We're still really on par. If we look at the charts, we shouldn't really be peaking until October, and then having a blow off top of the altcoin market, 30 to 90 days after that. And it's all in line. It's just, people are freaking out because they've got this instant gratification. They spend too much time on TikTok and they discover crypto for the first time and they're expecting to make $1 million by Thursday. And it's like, everybody's waiting for that big thing that's going to happen tomorrow morning that's going to change everyone's lives overnight. And I'm like, there's much bigger stuff at play. You have to be patient.
Yeah. So going back to 2021, you were right with Cardano. Cardano was probably the best or one of the best performing altcoins.
I'm always right sometimes.
I've also seen on your channel that Charles Hopkinsons has been on multiple times. Tell me about the relationship you have with Charles.
I think Charles is a super, super smart guy that understands I was probably the first YouTuber to adopt Cardano and educate people and bring people into the ecosystem. And he respects that enough to give me his time. But ultimately, I think he thinks I'm an idiot.
Okay, I wasn't expecting you to say that.
No, I'm kidding. I mean, it's just like he's on just a different plane of existence, man. You know what I mean? And I'm just like this. I remember when I was at Rare Evo and he came up to me and he was lit. I mean, he was so lit, and he introduced me to some woman as like this famous MMA fighter. I'm like, Charles, I'm a fucking nerd on YouTube. I talk about Cardano. I'm like, yes, I've got an MMA background, but he's like, he's the biggest MMA fighter and all. And it's just like, you know, I guess that he thought that was more cool to introduce me as than like, you know, he was one of my first supporters. You know what I mean? But yeah, like you know, it's like I think Charles respects me for what I've done for his.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if Cardano was Charles' kid, maybe I'm the nanny. You know, it's kind of one way of looking at it. And I think he appreciates that, and he gives me his time. But it's like we're not going to barbecues or anything together, and you know, he doesn't like. We'll chat on Telegram, you know, here and there, and you know, he'll like send me something he wants me to check out, and I'll give him my comments, and it's a fun little relationship, you know, but it's not like, you know, you know, it's nothing like Charles doesn't sit and drop alpha on me and be like, hey, here's a secret, but don't tell anybody, you know. And it's like I think he knows that if he did tell me things, they wouldn't leave the room. Um, I'm pretty confident, but that's the way I am with everybody. Like I know shit about everybody. I don't tell anybody anything because A, it's either none of my business, or B, it's just not the way I am. Like I'm not a clout chaser. Um, I don't really give a shit about like, oh, this person did this or that person. I don't care, right? I'm old. I'm like 47. I've got a family. I've got much bigger fish to fry than like stupid petty bullshit. And you know, it's like people tell me things all the time, like in confidence that I would never break. It's just not. It's against kind of the way I'm wired, I think. So, you know, it's just. I don't know, man. It's like I love Charles to death. Sometimes I want to leg kick the shit out of him, and he knows it. I mean, I've actually had little like Charles, you
Oh my
motherfucker.
gosh.
Like, I've had little chats with him, and then you know, and then afterwards he's like, "Oh, Crow, stop, come on," you know. And I'm like, "Oh, you're right. Okay, I'm calm," you know. So yeah, man, it's just kind of funny. Like our relationship is I'm pretty sure unique. Sometimes I can be like an antsy baby. Sometimes I feel like he knows he can count on me to be very helpful. Yeah, man, I think we just respect each other for who we are, and that is what it is.
You touched upon there, he introduced you to one of his female friends as an MMA fighter. Now, I know where you've had a fight, haven't you, with Karate Combat Moon Daddy,
Yeah, yeah. If you
didn't
could
you,
call it that.
as a crypto influencer? Tell me
I
about that.
fought years ago, though. I fought like 11 years ago.
You fought 11 years. Was it
Kirk
Kurt
Miller.
Miller?
Mhm.
I've seen that fight. I've
Yeah,
seen it. Yeah.
yeah. That was faster than the Karate Combat one, and Kirk was actually 7-2, I think, or 7-4 at the time. And he was 6'6", so Kirk was bigger, better, everything, and I beat him faster than I beat Moon Daddy. So maybe it's because I'm getting old. But yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, honestly, like I really don't think Moon Daddy should have been in there at all, and I felt really, really bad actually the way that turned out. Um, because we had kind of an agreement at first to where we weren't going to try and like the only real rule we had is not to punch the other guy in the teeth. That was pretty
Mhm.
much the only real rule we had. And I knew he was nervous, and I told him, I'm like, dude, this doesn't have to be a bloodbath. Like, you know, like if you, he had reservations, and I'm like, you know, we can make this fun, you know, but the closer we got, I know he went to Brazil to train, and I think he started getting in his head that he could beat me. And like, I feel like I'm a pretty humble guy, and I feel like I'm a very compassionate guy, but like there is a beast in this big ass frame of mine, and it's like I can either be the most loving, compassionate softy, or I can end you. Like there's no two, like that's just how it is, right? Like my wife always tells people, like, you don't have to be intimidated or worry about me unless you're a bad person. If you're a bad person, run. It's, my wife has told that to so many people. It's funny because it's true. Like I despise liars. I despise shady people. And I have no problem calling them out to their face. I don't give a shit if their family's there. I don't care. If you're a terrible person, I will let you know. Get away from me. But Moon Daddy's not. He wasn't a terrible person. He was a cool guy, and he was a humble guy, and I liked him. And I told him, I said, listen, man, I'm like, there's a part of the promo where I said, you know, I said something to the effect of like, you know, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna dive as deep into the shit as he wants to go. And yeah, I actually told him, I was like, listen, man, if it comes down to it, I was like, I'm gonna feed you an illegal leg kick. I told him straight up, I'm like, I'm gonna give you an illegal leg kick. And I'm like, if at that moment you know you're done and you know you don't want any more, just stop the fight. I'll lose by DQ. Everyone saves face. And he's like, okay, all right, cool. And when the fight, that's why, like, I was doing really weird shit very early in the fight because I was trying to give him an opportunity to get out of it.
Oh.
And he wouldn't do it. And you'll see at the end where I'm like, dude, why didn't you stop the fight? And he's like, man, you can see in his face, like, I just couldn't. I'm like, all right. I mean, like, so I fed him that first kick, and then the ref, the thing is that his coach came up to me before the fight, and other people were coming up to me telling me, oh man, like Moon Daddy's really trying to, he's wanting to take your head off, man. He's wanting to knock you out. And I'm like, really? Is that where we're at with this? Okay. Like, you know, I was kind of pissed, but I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm going to stay true to what I told him. And, you know, if I get caught because of it, it is what it is. And, but he wouldn't quit. He didn't want to quit. He was in there already. He ate that first leg kick, which is weird and awkward, but it was on purpose. And then the second leg kick was like, all right, this is a little bit more real. And you can see I like threw the kick, and I'm like, what's happening? And I threw a little thing in his belly, like, are you done? I would never do that in like a dangerous fight, you know? And he just kept like eyeballing me, and then he fed me the little kick to my ankle, and I'm like, all right, man. So I gave him that side kick, and I hit him, and I thought that was going to be it. And then and he went down, and then I jumped on him. I was about to put him in a rear naked choke, and I forgot this isn't an MMA fight. So, and then the ref was like, stop it, break it up. And then I'm like, all right, I'm ending this shit because I don't know where this is going to go, and I don't like it. And that was when I basically just 1-2 and put him down. And then he thanked me afterwards. He's like, dude, you gave me a clean death, man. He's like, thank you, brother. And I'm like, you know, I wish I didn't have to, you know, it was supposed to be that way, but you had me all kinds of confused, and I wasn't taking any unnecessary risks. So yeah, that's basically what happened with that fight.
So how many seconds was the fight?
45.
45 seconds. And was it knockout? Did you get, was it a knockout?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think with Kurt as well, that was a knockout as well.
I think Kurt was TKO because I connected with Kurt with I think it was a left hook that sent him down to the mat, and then I basically, you know, in MMA, you know, a lot of people think like when you knock a guy out or you knock him down and like the guy still jumps on him and hits him a few more times. It's not because they're assholes. It's because that's what you're trained to do. Because if you hit a guy and you knock him out or knock him down and he wakes up from getting hit twice by the mat and continues fighting, if you give him an opportunity to get up and he recovers, you lose the fight, you're done. The fight is not over until the ref stops you. And so, you know, when you've got all of that on the line, you're not just going to like with Kurt or with With Ramel, I knew when I hit him. I broke my hand when I hit him. My hand was like fractured for, I mean, I think it took 5 months to
Oh my
heal.
gosh.
Yeah, like it was bad. Like I hit him really hard. And the thing is like the same way when I hit Kurt, you don't, when you hit someone clean, you don't feel a thing. It's almost like you're hitting air. It's like it's just a weird feeling. Like you don't even really know. But after once, you know what it feels like. You know when you've connected clean to a guy and that he's done. And I knew that Moon Daddy was done when I saw him just shoot down into the mat like that. I'm like, oh God. And I felt bad. I was just like, I didn't want it to be this way, but like he kind of gave me no choice, dude. But he's a warrior, man. I mean, he went for it, he tried, and he was just, he had that first fight nerves. It happens to everyone. The adrenaline is just crippling, so and he could have pulled out at any time. He could have stopped the fight. I could have taken a DQ. He could have handled that in any other way, and he chose to say, I put myself in this situation, I'm going to see it through, whatever it is. And man, I give him all the credit in the world, honestly, because he has a hell of a lot more balls than 95% of the men out there that were like trash talking him because of that.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so let's have a look. So when you look back at your career as a YouTuber, you've had a really, really successful year. You've had videos that have reached over 1 million views. What has been the highlight of your career as a YouTuber?
For me, honest to God, the highlight is when I'm bombarded by people on my chat, like thanking me for like making them millionaires.
Oh, so sweet.
Stop. I don't want to get emotional in this stupid video, damn it. I got to stop doing that. No, honest to God, that's why I'm in it. Like I just the highlight for me is just other people's success, and honestly, a big part of what I feel like I do anymore is just trying to keep people's eye on the ball while keeping them away from the shit that is going to hurt them. And it's like, back in the day when I was really ignorant to a lot of how the crypto market worked, I I was all about everything because it was all new. You know what I mean? And there was so much really cool stuff, so many cool concepts out there. And nowadays, I used to give Tone Vase a lot of shit back in the day because I'm like, dude, you are such a negative Nancy. I'm like, all crypto's a scam. If it's not Bitcoin, it's a scam, right? And I used to think you're just an asshole. And I would tell him, I'm like, dude, what is your deal, right? And it's like in hindsight, I'm like, all right, Tone, I get it. Because the majority of the crypto assets out there, I mean, meme coins aside, like the majority of these assets are cash grabs. And a lot of them are just, that's why I always try to focus on layer ones, because it's the layer ones that are effectively going to change the world. Everything else is just a different flavor of the same cake. And like a lot of these flavors are here today, gone tomorrow. And so yeah, they can be speculated on, but when you've got an abundance of newcomers to the space every cycle that don't know what's happening, and they're basically like me back in 2017 who didn't know about the market cycles and the peaks and all of this, I would much rather put people into assets that I believe are going to stand that test of time from cycle to cycle than like, oh, you're going to make so much quick money tomorrow by investing in this shit coin that's probably going to dump in 90 days. And like, it's just like, that's not my way. I want my viewers to like, I'm 47 and my legacy means something to me. My soul can't be bought. I'm like, I will not sell out to enrich myself at the expense of other people. And when I see these other influencers out there doing that shit, it like sickens me to the core. I'm like, you are selling your soul, like, and it's like, and I feel like that has a cascading effect over time that a lot of these people don't realize yet. They haven't seen that yet, but it's coming, and it's coming, and it's going to bite a lot of these people in the ass. And it may not even be related to crypto when it does, but it's just like, I feel like these people are really going to learn valuable, hard lessons And it's just like, I'm too old for that shit, man. I want everyone that has anything to do with me, even outside of crypto. It's like I try to take care of the people around me. It's just like I really, really care about legacy. Like I really care about legacy. At my age, being a 7 foot, 290 pound dude, I don't know how long I'm gonna be around, and that scares the shit out of me. And I want my life to fucking mean something. And it's not, the money that I sell my soul for today isn't gonna go with me. You know what I'm
I want to talk about your community now. So I'm in your Telegram, I'm in your Discord. You have an absolutely wonderful, very, very loyal community. People have been with you for a long time. Tell me about them.
My Telegram group used to have like 10,000 people in it. My Discord may still, I don't know. I don't like Discord personally, so I'm never really in my Discord. I hate all the dinging and the binging and all the craziness. It feels like an anxiety cave somehow. It's just like I open up Discord and I go into the groups and it's just like ding, ding, ding. It's like being in a casino, and it drives me nuts. So I generally don't even have it open unless I'm using Midjourney for something. But my Telegram I love, and yeah, like Crypto Chef and Dave Nance, and those are like my two like homies, man. Like they've been a part of me for a long time, and they help so much with like anything. It's just like, um, and it's like a lot of the people in the community, I feel, try to offer value to everyone else in the community. Like there aren't any trolls in there. There's no like seedy, shitty people in there. Like a lot of like if you were to join like a meme coin community, it's like everyone's just a little shithead, right? And it's just like, I don't allow that kind of stuff, man. Like, I'm not about the drama, and I'm not about like, oh yeah, look at these people fighting. That's great for engagement. Or I don't look at stuff like that, man. It's just like, um, yeah, it's like the people in my community are great.
It is a really, really good community, and they're all really educated and so helpful as well. So just before we go, I wanted to touch upon your family. Now, we've spoken about your family before. You have a wonderful family. Tell me about your stepson and your daughters.
Well, I have two older daughters in Cincinnati, and then uh, I have a son in Arizona who's a singer and a musician. And then I have kids all over the world, by the way. Like no, I'm kidding, sort of. And then I have my youngest daughter with my wife now. It's the only wife I've ever had. I'm still married to her. We've been together 15 years. And then her son, my stepson, who is he's a drummer and a rock climber, and yeah, like we've got a patchwork quilt. We're kind of like the Brady Bunch a little bit.
Tell me about your stepson's tattoo because
Oh,
it
see,
really touched my heart when I heard that story.
yeah. Now you're really gonna get me on that one. Um, my testosterone must be low right now. I'm a little overly emotional today. Um, so when I met his mother, he hated me. Like he did not like me at all. He was 8 years old. He was not used to having a male around. He could kind of play his mother any way he wanted to. He would get real irate. I remember her and I being on the phone one night, and it was bedtime for him. And she's like, "All right, it's bedtime." And he's like, "I don't want to go to bed." And he's like losing his shit. And so like when I like really came into the picture, he just did not know how to handle having a male figure. And now I wasn't the kind of like stepdad where I'm just like, all right, you little shit, I'm here now. You're gonna, you know what I mean? I was never trying to be that way unless my wife asked me to. You know what I mean? I tried to give them the space, everybody their space. I wasn't trying to just come in and like change everybody's world overnight. And I just kind of followed her lead and what she needed help with until that kind of respect and you have to grow that kind of stuff over time. You don't just walk in and like, I'm the guy now. All right. You listen to me. So, um, and it was a struggle for a little while. And I just remember him, crying and he's like, why did you marry him? Why does he have to be here? That kind of thing. Mm. And he used to, and I used to tell him, I'm like, you hate me now, but you're gonna love me when you're older. And he's like, I'm never gonna love you, blah blah blah. So recently, he's now in his 20s, and we have a great relationship. And he's like a good dude. He's such a good dude, and he's grown into such a respectable young man. Someone I'm very proud of. And he got he saved up his own money, and he got a part of his sleeve tattoo done with the most amazing crow I've ever seen in my honor. And damn you. And he just said, I remember what you told me when I was little, and you're right. That's it. I got to talk about something else.
Let's talk about that actually. So your real name's Jason. How
Mhm.
did you become Crypto Crow?
I love the movie The Crow.
Oh, the one with
Brandon
Bruce
Lee.
Lee's son.
Yeah,
Is it the one?
the movie Brandon Lee.
Oh, Brandon. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've seen that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that movie, and that was like I think a big part of when I was kind of finding myself when I was a teenager. That was like I don't know, there was a lot of meaning behind that movie. And when I was young, I used to be full of a lot of anger, just being raised by a single mother and like not having a father, and all of that stuff. It's just like I was always kind of full of anger and confusion and frustration and all that. And when I used to sit around with the Crow graphic novel, and I would light candles. And this is going to sound so like funny, but it's what I did when I was like 17. I would sit around, I'd light candles, I'd listen to Sarah McLachlan or Tori Amos, and I would just draw out of the Crow graphic novel. And it was therapeutic for me in a lot of ways, and it would kind of calm me down. And just connecting with that character, like if you could come back and right the wrongs, you know what I mean, right your wrongs. And when I knew, like I researched, like what is the story really about. It was like James O'Barr, and I think it was because, if I remember correctly, after all these years, his wife was killed by a DUI driver. And so the Crow was kind of a manifestation of all of that pain that he suffered from the loss of his wife. And like, basically, like, I wish I could, I wish she could come back. I wish, just everything about it was magical to me. And then, Brandon Lee basically being killed accidentally during the filming of the movie adds such a, obviously I wish that would have never happened, but there's just a lot about it to me that's always made me feel some kind of way. And it helped me a lot when I was young. And so um, I used to call myself the Electric Crow when I was a kid. And I remember I had it on the back window of a car I had. It was a Dodge Avenger back when they first came out. Nobody had ever seen them. And I remember a cop pulled me over once to ask me what that was. And I was like, oh, that's my hacker name. That's what I told him. And he's like, Electric Crow. And he's like, and then I had other friends that were making fun of me because the car I had didn't have power windows or anything. Like, this car is an Electric Crow, but she ain't got no power windows. She ain't got no power steering. Like, so, but yeah. So, and then when I got into crypto, I'm like, Crypto Crow, man, like that's going to be my identity. So.
No, that's a lovely story. Awesome. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Crypto Crow, for coming on and telling us your crypto journey.
Yeah, I hope this video does well for you. I really put it all out there on this one. So yeah. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
Jolly good.